All right, today we're going to learn about the scientific revolution. But before we talk about the scientific revolution, we have to know what a revolution is. So, when you hear the word revolution, what kind of things come to mind? You might think of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, even some other examples, but all of these things made a major change in the world. So, a revolution is a major change. Now, what was the scientific revolution? It was a major change in science. So it was an exciting time period from the 1500s to the 1700s, so the second half of the Renaissance, where people in Europe began to change the way they thought about the world. So there had been a way that people thought about the world for hundreds of years. And now, with this idea of humanism and people being able to change the world, discover things, and do great things, they start to question the old teachings and say, well, actually, we're going to use science to figure these things out. But before we figure out what their new way of thinking is, we have to know how they were thinking before the scientific revolution. So, most of the teachings were based on the Bible and Aristotle. So, much like with the Catholic Church, they relied on the Bible, and they also relied on a man named Aristotle, who you probably learned about in sixth grade, who was a scientist, and they didn't question anything he said for hundreds of years. For example, one of his theories, we already talked about this today, is the geocentric theory, and the theory that Earth is the center of the universe. However, we know today that the sun is actually the center of the universe. But if they hadn't questioned this in the 1600s, then we would not know that the sun was the center of the universe. Now, there were some changes in Europe that impacted the scientific revolution, and one of them is increased contact with different religions that was caused by an increase in trade and cultural diffusion. So, with the Renaissance, when people are trading ideas and goods, they're exchanging their cultures or diffusing their cultures to different places. So, people from Muslim countries are meeting Europeans, and the Europeans are taking those Muslim cultures back to their countries, or vice versa, where the Christians are meeting Muslims and the Muslims take some of those Christian ideas back. Also, Europeans are realizing that they were wrong about some things. One example is that they believe there were only three continents: Europe, Africa, and Asia, because they were the only continents around them. But as things are invented and people are able to explore, they eventually discovered that there's 7 continents. Now to this new way of thinking. So this new way of thinking, the biggest part of it was questioning everything. So again, this idea of humanism, that people can change the world, and like Martin Luther questioned the Catholic Church, people are questioning old teachings of science. And they used logic and reason to explain the world. So they're not just going off of the Bible and their faith and what the church has been telling them for hundreds of years. They want proof, they want logic and reason. And they start asking lots of questions. Now, after the scientific revolution, or when they're making these new changes with this new way of thinking, there's some tension between science and the church. So some scientific conclusions question the beliefs of the Catholic Church and what was written in the Bible. So, for example, the church believed what Aristotle said, that Earth is the center of the universe. But as we read about some scientists today, and as we know today in 2020, that the sun is the center of the universe, not the earth. And that went against what the church was teaching. However, many scientists were religious men and saw science as a way to better understand God's world. So they weren't necessarily saying, no, no, the church is wrong and we don't want anything to do with them. They were really saying, we believe in God and we just want to understand his world better.